I was caught. I done lots of crimes. Some of them I got away with. I think it's a good job. Best of luck to whoever got the few quid.
If someone does a robbery and no one's killed or no one's shot, it sounds like, well, they're an ordinary decent criminal. There's no such thing.
Armed robbery brutalises people.
They tax you on the proceeds of crime. That's what the Criminal Assets Bureau do.
Because of my ignorance to the tax laws, that's why I paid them that. They didn't get paid on the proceeds of crime. They got paid on taxes.
The Criminal Assets Bureau, by its name and its very nature, is about two things. It's about criminality and it's about assets.
But you were a major criminal.
Well, I don't know what is a major criminal. Like, I mean, is a major criminal a guy who doesn't pay his tax? Is that a major criminal?
No, a person who's involved in two of the biggest armed robberies in the history of the state is a major criminal.
Well, that's not me.
This is the story of a modern-day criminal godfather, Gerry Hutch. The once poor boy from Dublin's inner city is today a multi-millionaire. Some achievement for a man who, as an adult, never held down a full-time job. So how did he do it? He says compensation claims enabled him to buy houses, invest his money, and ultimately become wealthy. Others point to two of the biggest armed robberies in the history of the state.
I started with 25 plus 9, 10, 35, and I've done a lot of business in property. It was a good time, and that's where I made my money. If people say armed robberies, so be it. I mean, I was questioned about these armed robberies you're talking about, so we let them decide, the people.
But the figures don't add up.
Sometimes figures don't add up.
At 5:30 p.m. on the 26th of January 1987, three armed and masked men held up and stole over £1.3 million from a Securicor cash in transit van outside the Bank of Ireland at Marino Mart in Fairview in Dublin. Gerry Hutch says he wasn't involved, and yet £75,000 from that robbery ended up in his Northern Ireland bank account. The Gardaí recovered another £129,000 from two men, Francis Sheridan and Loman Hickey, who they believed were acting for Hutch. Sheridan and Hickey admitted laundering the money and were subsequently convicted and jailed.
No, not the money they had. It wasn't my money.
Well, they said it was the money from the Marino Mart robbery.
Well, then it was for the Marino Mart. It wasn't mine.
And they said they were holding it for you. They were laundering it for you.
Yeah, well, that's not true. They weren't.
£75,000 of the money from the Marino Mart robbery ended up in your bank account in Belfast.
No, I had a bank account in Belfast with money in it, all right. I wasn't under Marino Mart.
It was found to be the Marino Mart money.
At the end of the day, yeah, they weren't happy that I had proper title to it, and they didn't give it back to me.
They didn't give it back to you because it was the Marino Mart money.
I don't know about that.
It was Securicor's money. The Belfast High Court gave it back to Securicor and said that was the money that was stolen from the Marino Mart robbery, and you were trying to claim that was your money. So obviously you either stole it.
I did claim that was my money, yeah. It was my money, and I lost my case. It wasn't their money.
But it's not just money that's lost during armed robberies, and while no one was killed at Marino Mart or Clonshock, people were traumatised and irreparably damaged.
We've had individuals with a gun put to your head, and you were told, if you don't do this, I'm going to either kill you, kill your family. We've had situations whereby family members have been told, if you don't do what I'm going to ask you to do now, you're not going to see your wife and child alive again. Now that's not normal in any society. That's not victimless.
And I saw the result of this type of crime at first hand in Templemoore's Scott Middle ceremony in 1982, when we had 3 Garda widows presented with Scott medals. Their husbands had been mown down in the previous 18 months in the course of armed robberies and one person carrying explosives.
8 years after the Marino Mart robbery, a gang of armed and masked men broke into the Brinks Allied Security cash holding depot at Clonshock in North Dublin. This time the loss was more than double that of Securicor's. £2.8 million in cash was driven away across the backfields and never recovered. Once again, The prime suspect was Gerry Hutch.
I know all about it. I've been arrested, questioned about it, I've been written about. That happened in 95. I thought it was 96. It was 95. 13 years ago.
£2.8 million.
Yeah.
The biggest robbery in the history of the state at the time.
Yeah.
You say you know all about it. Tell us about it.
I've read all about it in the newspapers. That's what I know about it. And any time it's written about, my photograph is thrown in. I was brought down to the station, arrested.
Well, what was that like?
Well, they interrogated me about the robbery, and I think they were satisfied it wasn't me, and they released me.
I don't think they were satisfied it wasn't you.
They released me at the end of the day.
Well, they had to, because they had no evidence on you, because it was such a well-planned job.
No, if you've no evidence on something, it's obviously you didn't do it.
No, it's not obvious you didn't do it.
You know, if everyone knows you've done it, like, everyone knows you've done it, there has to be stuff to back it up.
The main suspect was arrested following an exhaustive Garda inquiry and nothing of evidential value. When you go in and you have to, the very first thing that you have to tell a person who's been interviewed is you're not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but anything you do say will be taken down and given in evidence. You're actually telling that person to stay quiet. And that's the reality of it.
And is that what happened?
That's basically what happened. He would talk the hind legs off you about anything else that you wanted to talk about, but ask him anything in relation to the robbery, he knew nothing, and on the advice of a solicitor he had nothing to say.
In fairness, the Gardaí believe you did it.
Yeah.
There's enough intelligence to link you to that robbery. There's enough intelligence to link you to the Marino Mart robbery. The community believe you did it. And every criminal in Dublin believes you did it.
Yeah. Okay. And why would they all believe that? Not the guards, every criminal and every people in the city. Because they read it in the paper. I'm beginning to believe I've done it myself from reading it in the paper. When you read these things every week after week, there must be no smoke without fire. It looks that way, it sounds that way. If it barks, it's a dog. I didn't do the robbery, you know.
But why do you say that when you know you did and everybody else knows you did it?
No.
I mean, the money that you made, the figures just don't add up. I mean, we've just gone into the Marino Mart one.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the compensation claim, it doesn't really wash.
It doesn't wash with you, it washes with me.
Well, the evidence is there in the money and the figures that don't add up. Because 1 minute, you're a guy who has no money, who's grown up in poverty.
Yeah.
You get a compensation claim.
Yeah.
And now you're a multimillionaire. Very suddenly you're a multimillionaire. And coincidentally, around the same time, 2 of the biggest armed robberies in the history of the state are carried out.
Yeah.
And you're linked to both of them.
Yeah. That's it.
Do you really expect people to believe that?
I don't care what they believe, to be honest. But what can I say? If everyone believes I've done them, hands up. I didn't do them. That's all I can say.
It's very difficult for the police to call in known criminals and try and get information when they can just sit there and look at a fixed spot on the wall. Second element is you've got bail laws that, from our perspective as an industry, as soon as we see who's out on bail, we know we're going to get attacked. Because these people are going to commit robberies because they're going to go away for a long stretch, so they might as well get done for 2 than as for 1 crime. The third element is that the judicial system, and we've seen it from tribunals, etc., it's just so long, so convoluted, it can take years from the time someone's picked up for the time that they're prosecuted.
Gerry Hutch says he is now a respectable, legitimate businessman. He drives a Hummer around town. A perfect gentleman, he carries, amongst others, debutantes to the ball. The company is registered as Carry Anybody, or CAB, his own little joke on the Criminal Assets Bureau, which sent him a bill for over £2 million. Hutch negotiated a settlement and paid £1.2 million, £500,000 of that in cash. He also availed of the tax amnesty.
Because of my ignorance to the tax laws, that's why I paid him that. I built up a portfolio of property and I had bank accounts, and this is it. I didn't pay me tax.
They taxed you on the proceeds of crime. That's what the Criminal Assets Bureau do.
The Criminal Assets Bureau tax people. I mean, well, when you say the proceeds of crime, it's tax. Not paying your tax is a crime. And that is, if you mean that way.
No, that's a different crime.
But it's a crime, so they've probably taxed me on that type of a crime. But they didn't take money off me from security van robberies and say, we want their tax out of that.
There are people out there who would have you believe that a certificate of tax clearance meant that people were innocent of criminality. A certificate of tax clearance is just that. It is not a certificate of innocence. We tax the proceeds of crime. Criminal Justice Bureau, by its name and its very nature, is about two things. It's about criminality and it's about assets. And it's about linking those assets derived from criminality back to criminality before we can bring a case before the courts.
I had a problem with the amount you were looking for because I couldn't afford that amount. Well, we came to an arrangement and we settled.
You still have your money, and lots of it.
I still have a few quid, of course. That was the deal. Can't leave in your knew it. You have to meet people halfway.
The tax settlement has not, however, given Gerry Hutch the respectability he wants and says he's now entitled to. While he admits to associating with major criminals, he claims he retired from crime when he last came out of prison 23 years ago. He's still, however, known as a crime boss, and for this he blames the tabloid media in general and one newspaper in particular.
You have the Sunday World particularly, if they're writing about incidents that's happening for the last 10, 15 years, no matter who is shot in Dublin, or who does a robbery, or who is doing drugs, they throw my photograph in right beside them all the time. They make it out that Gerry Hutch, the boss of crime, and if they put me in with a photograph with people who were shot and they're saying I'm the boss of crime, it makes me look like that I'm the leader of this pack and all that type of stuff, which is totally untrue.
In a statement to Prime Time this afternoon, the Sunday World said it stands over everything it has written about Mr. Hutch over the years. But you are a convicted criminal.
Oh yes, a convicted criminal, yeah, I know that. But not a convicted armed robber, not a convicted hitman, you know, no, not convicted drug dealer, no. There's so many things, you know.
Gerry Hutch was born into poverty on the 12th of April 1963, and it's poverty he blames for his own criminality.
Well, as a kid, like, I mean, my first conviction was for stealing a red bottle of lemonade. I got a fine, and then I was involved in another crime as a kid, stealing and breaking into shops. There was nothing around. I mean, first up, best dressed. I had no choice. You had to get into crime to feed yourself. My mind, dress yourself.
Poverty is not an excuse for committing crime. I have served in some of the more neglected areas of this city, and the amount of decent people that I've met far, far, far outweighs the people who have gone and committed crime. They never would steal to put bread on their table.
In Mountjoy Prison, 15 thrown into it. I have a kid now, 15, and I look at the kid and I say, my God, when I was 15, I was in prison. I mean, I was in prison with murderers, rapists, bank robbers, everything in a male prison, full of all them. I mean, that's not right. It was like going to college for criminals.
Gerry Hutch was always different, somewhat distant from those he grew up with in the north inner city. He taught himself to read and write in prison, didn't drink, smoke or take drugs, and he says he despises drugs because of what they do to individuals and communities.
What would concern me is the media linking me to the drug trade. The drug culture is the scourge of the country. All towns everywhere has it. But I mean, the Justice Minister and the department should make it illegal to have drugs in your system. And go into a party, people taking drugs, arrest them, take a DNA, you have drugs in your system, it's against the law, now you're nicked.
The Hutch family name is well known in organised crime circles in Dublin, not just because of Gerard's reputation, but also because of the activities of his nephews, Derek Delboy Hutch, the late Christopher Bouncer Hutch, and Gerry Hutch. These pictures are horrific, blood being washed off the streets following a murder. But this is the shocking reality of gangland crime today, where there's no respect for human life. Gerry Hutch was driving this Jeep when Patrick Doyle was attacked in it and shot dead in Spain last month.
I feel if they're involved in serious crime, they're very foolish to be involved in serious crime, but like, I mean, they're my nephews. There's probably 50 guys out there are 50 family members with the same name as Hutch, and if one of them gets into trouble, whether he's a relative or a friend, it lands on my door with the media. I'm thrown in, my photograph is thrown in.
But they are serious players. They are serious players.
Well, I have kids myself. I have a wife and I have 5 kids, and my kids are not involved in crime.
But Gerry Hutch was also accused of shooting Paul Dicey Riley in December 2006. Riley first made a statement to Gardaí in hospital, but subsequently not only retracted it, he also went to court and said he had gotten all mixed up and didn't know what he had been saying. Gerry Hutch was acquitted of the charges. Wasn't there a meeting of the Hutches after that?
No, I wasn't involved in any meeting with anybody. I mean, if, like, Dicey Riley was alleged that he was shot, and the young lad was arrested and put in custody, and he faced trial on it. And,
he made a statement identifying Gerry as the shooter.
Against him, that he done it, and then he retracted his statement.
And how did that happen?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if people get shot and he's in hospital on a dying bed, he's liable to say anything.
Well, he's not really.
It came to some arrangement, or he must have realised it wasn't him. I don't know exactly the details of it, but if he changed his statement, he changed his statement.
People would make statements, and they would, you know, at the particular time, they would have every intention of standing by them. Then all of a sudden, they would either get a phone call or a shot fired through their door or a petrol bomb up against their house, and the next thing they would be in touch with you and saying, look, I'm sorry, but I can't give that evidence, and I want to withdraw my statement.
The Gardaí haven't laid a glove on Gerry Hutch in over a quarter of a century. He was last convicted of a criminal offence in 1983 and insists he hasn't committed a crime since. People here feel he's the victim of a campaign of vilification.
Yeah, come on, say what? What do you want to say?
The papers want to leave this man alone.
Good, yeah.
Gerry Hutch built this boxing club, Corinthians, in Dublin's north inner city, and he helps fund it out of his own pocket. And whether or not that's the proceeds of crime, it's the kind of amenity that's badly needed in the area but hasn't been provided by the state. It's also a vivid illustration of the influence and power he wields within this community and the respect and fear he engenders in the criminal community.
Well, yeah, probably so, but it's not like back off or I'll do this.
Doesn't have to be said.
Yeah, well, maybe so. Yeah, if that's it, that's it. But I would have done that on numerous occasions, I mean.
A man of influence?
Probably so. Like, I mean, a guy came up to me one day, one of the councillors, one of the local councillors, and he said, there's a guy there and he's owed 30 grand, or not 30 grand, 10 grand for drugs, and the drug dealer is giving him a terrible time, and he's telling them that he's going to get you, the sorter. I says, well, tell him that the kid gave me the money, and that's the end of that.
It is the end of it.
Rather than see some kid getting seriously injured because he owes a debt, which is disgraceful, but these things happen. And if you can just say, oh, it's nothing to do with me, which it isn't, but if some woman comes over who you grew up with and says her son is, you have to kind of give her a dig out. That type of thing, you know.
What about the criminal that sort of sets himself up as the mediator in the community, the guy who says that he can talk to both the ordinary people and the criminals who are terrorising the community?
Mr. Fix-It. The Gardaí are the only lawful authority to deal with crime in this country. That's our responsibility. We're custodians of the peace. That's our job. What I would say to people living in communities is to give anybody that sets themselves up in that position a very wide berth. What sanctions has that person? And that can only lead to more criminality and more pain and trauma for people.
Another reason why he's feared is because he was suspected of being involved in the murder of Mel Cox, a scrap dealer who, in the summer of 1987, was shot dead in the garden of his Blanchardstown home. It's widely believed, but like so much about him, it has never been proven that Gerry Hutch did it, and he vehemently protests his innocence. Did you know Mel Cox?
No.
You didn't know?
Didn't know.
He was from the north inner city?
From the north inner city, and I didn't know Mel Cox. I heard of him being shot dead, but I didn't know him.
A 43-year-old scrap dealer, he was shot in the front garden of his house in Blanchardstown in the summer of 1987.
Yeah.
He was from your community.
Yeah, but I didn't know him.
Do you think he's part of the reason why you have a reputation of a man to be feared?
It probably is, but I'd never met that man. And, like, I'd know his wife and their family, but I've never met that man.
Did you have a row with him in a pub?
No.
Because that's the word down there.
Yeah, but that's all nonsense, because I've never had a row with the man.
And that's the reason why he ended up dead.
Well, it's totally
And people in the
without
community-
foundation.
Sorry?
It's not true.
Gerry Hutch is unique in that he can move with apparent ease among criminals and law-abiding citizens. He says he sleeps well at night and is not worried about getting shot in his bed, not like Martin Foley or the few of his other surviving contemporary criminals. Gerry Hutch has not been convicted of any of the armed robberies he's been blamed for. In fact, he has no conviction for armed robbery and hasn't been convicted of any crime in the last 25 years. Gerry Hutch says his crime is tax evasion, and whether that's true or not, he's now living very well off the proceeds of crime. He may be retired, but few believe he's fully reformed.
My house was broken into twice. I'm talking about victims of crime. Like, I've been a victim of crime.
And what did you lose?
I called the ambulance for them.